La musica.
I am the oldest of five children born to John and Geneva Calhoun. I was born on July 7th, 1935 in Oklahoma City, where my dad was a farmer and my mom a teacher. Being a very large baby, I should have been born by cesarean section but was born naturally because my dad had an argument with the doctor. During my birth, the cord wrapped around my neck and I not only suffered from oxygen deprivation, but also a broken neck. It was a hard delivery and both my mom and I almost died. I was born with cerebral palsy. After moving to Oregon, my father decided that I should go live at Fairview, a state institution in Salem. My mother helped me with walking and work so that I could live at home. She wanted me to stay home, but my father wanted me to move. I remember that my mom, brother, and sisters cried when I moved. I was just 5 years old.
Actually, I didn't know a lot of details of John's life at Fairview until we started doing his speeches, when he started writing his speeches, and particularly the whole trauma of him leaving home and how I knew that he had always said that his father wanted him to go and his mother didn't, but the whole notion that the father is the person that wants me to go and that he ends up being the person that takes him to Fairview and they don't talk about it and John doesn't know the picture of where he's going or what it is that he's going to and he's 5 years old. It's just like very sad to me, very and hard to think about what that would have been like for a child.
As this was way back in 1940, I rode in my dad's big old car, in the car seat without a seatbelt. Since I was not going back home, I had everything I owned with me, but had no idea where I was going. I don't remember much about the trip from Lebanon to Salem riding alone with my dad, but I do remember being mad and scared. My dad didn't talk to me the entire time and I cried for the whole ride.
Yes, when John was born in the 30s, um, it, it, I think the view of society as a whole, and particularly the medical profession, was that an individual with a disability as severe as John's would never be able to function in society normally, in what we think of as normally, or what was thought of in those days as normally, and that the best thing to do And the most humane thing to do for the individual was to put them in an institution where they could get some special treatment and assistance with their disability. And they really just simply didn't recognize the fact that the importance of family and family love and family support um, gives to individuals with this type of disability. And I think John is a wonderful case of this because when you talk to him and he talks about his mother particularly, who was a very warm and loving person and did everything she could to take care of him. Um, and then when he talks, in contrast, when he talks about the way things were at Fairview, there were some individuals that were fairly good, but on the whole, they viewed the staff as them, you know, in a way, the bad guys, and they tried to figure out ways to outwit the staff and play jokes on them and things of that nature. But that was a survival technique, I think, for the individuals who were forced into this very unnatural situation at such an early age.
What I'm amazed at when I listen to John and he talks about Fairview is I know because he's told me some of the very difficult things he went through, and particularly he doesn't talk in his speeches very much about some of the health care things that happened to him, but they are pretty outrageously unbelievable. That he was sick when he was in the hospital because he had a blood transfusion and they'd given him the wrong blood type. That they tried to straighten his legs by breaking bones and putting casts on, and then when they finally come out, he's like covered with it sounds like staph infection the way that he talks about boils and just completely he's very ill, feverish, and just it sounds like just not good medical care.
I think John was very seriously misunderstood by the staff at Fairview, and particularly the doctors, the people who were evaluating the residents. He was considered to be fairly strongly mentally retarded at the time. And I think this is primarily because nobody who was doing these evaluations took the trouble to learn how John could communicate. And so they assumed because he didn't, that he didn't know.
Sometimes the assistants put dresses on me instead of pants because it was easier to change my diapers. Although they put dresses on me, I knew how to use the bedroom, so I told them to put my pants back on.
And he talks about like being put down in the cage because he and his friend Roy were goofing around or something, and they go down in the cage and they can't move around or anything. They're just down there and they're in trouble, and just kind of laughs and says, well, then we did that, and then we had to go back upstairs again. Evidently in some of the buildings it was like a timeout room, but they called it a cage because it literally looks like a place where there's wire doors and stuff. And again, I'm not sure if that's exactly, but what it sounds like is they had some kind of timeout place, and if you got in trouble, you might have to go down there, and it was like isolation. You couldn't be with the rest of your friends upstairs. You just went down in the basement. That's where you stayed. Yet when you talk to John and he tells you about Fairview, he has these incredible, fond, happy memories of the relationships of people and these great times he had, and how he would sneak away with his friends and watch the airplane, or they would play jokes on the staff, and the staff wouldn't know it, and they'd be communicating between them about stuff about the staff, and the staff didn't have any clue about they were making fun of him or whatever. That he just like has his whole outlook on life. But that time in Fairview, such a positive memory of Fairview, when in fact it is hard for me to think would I have been at all that positive given all those experiences.
There were a number of people who were moving had moved together from Fairview and then moved over to Siuslaw. And there was this sort of stream of people that came to UCP from Siuslaw. They were, and I don't know who the first one was, but I don't believe it was John. I think there were others that came up here. And it was no particular order, but somehow they got a hold of the idea that we were opening this group home in 1990. I'm sorry, 1980 we opened the group home. What am I saying? It was the first group home for folks who were physically disabled or people with cerebral palsy. And so it was at that point that we started seeing folks coming up from Siuslaw.
I think one of the most striking memories I have of Alder Street Group Home was the dinner hour, where you had this very, it would appear to most people's homes, a large dining room. But if you could imagine 12 people, 10 of them in wheelchairs, either power or manual wheelchairs, plus 3 to 4 staff sitting around a huge, like, long table, and everybody's trying to get their food, and it's crowded. I mean, it's like being in I felt like it was like being in a mess hall almost. And if somebody, when you think about your own home and a dining room, it was not that picture at all. It was like everybody crowded into this room and everybody trying to get food. And many of the people needed some help with eating also. And so trying to help people. And I guess of all the kind of experiences, that's one that just kind of strikes in my mind about how I would like every meal to be like that, where I have to like kind of crowd to get what I wanted. And people always describe the group homes as home-like, and to this day I just can't, that just wasn't anything like a home that I ever thought of.
The food wasn't so good, and I missed Florence and my friends. There were many more rules in Alder Street, and the administrator was kind of bossy. He was nervous for me to ride the bus and restricted where I could go in the community. At first he wouldn't listen to what I had to say. One time I got mad and kicked him. After that he paid more attention and let me go out more often.
I think the other thing about the group home, that as much as we tried to really support people's wishes and their rights, that there was always some negotiating of people who got their way or what they wanted. Because things like transportation, we had a van for that probably 6 or 7 people could go someplace. But when you only have 2 to 3 staff, and generally you can't go out in the community with more than a couple people at a time, it meant that the others were always in these huge group kind of situations, or they would go out as a huge group. It's like always corralling people and going places, and people not getting to know people on an individual basis. The bathrooms, I mean, they had their little, they would have like the toilets and a wash and a sink in between 2 rooms, but as far as the bathing area, it was one big area. So I remember there were women's night and men's night, so that people could take a bath only certain times of the week.
After living in Alder Street for 5 years, I began to think about moving out on my own. A few of us in Alder Street really wanted to move, so I pushed UCP.
Looking at the fact that we had a balloon payment due on this group home, and we were talking about there's got to be a different way to support people, and of course we had Tara was our community services director, or at least in charge of residential. I don't know when we made that transition. It was in there as well. And of course we had people like John living at the group home who were demanding more independence. And we had some people, as we characterized it, who were poised at the front door, ready to get out, and other people were kind of in their bedrooms, hanging onto their bedposts, saying, "No, I don't want to go."
The neat thing about it is it started out as kind of a negative, what I would view as a negative with a negative feel to it, with a negative progress. Their budgets weren't working real well, and people needed to move from all the street, and people were thinking all kinds of crisis. And out of that, again, with some people who spoke up on a national level, said, "Hey, why don't people just move into their own places? That would make some sense."
Now, how did John become first? Very clear. We said, who wants, who's interested, but John was just like jumping out of his chair wanting to go. So it made the most sense he was first.
Well, if John could have jumped out of his chair and jumped up and down, that's what you would have seen. I mean, he emoted so much energy, and the guy was, his history was such that he had come from such a place of being down, and now he was having an opportunity to be up and to design his own life, that there was this incredible energy that developed around him and around the people that supported him, and the way he went about and they went about finding a place for him to live. And as I recall, the first place he lived was like this high-rise downtown. I mean, he knew in his mind what he wanted, and he wanted a high-rise downtown, and that's exactly what we worked out for him.
I moved into my apartment on May 9th, 1989. It was the first time in my entire life that I had slept in the quiet of my own home without anyone around.
And literally almost probably a year to the date from when John moved into his own place, May of the following year, we were asked to speak at a national convention for United Cerebral Palsy Association about the move. And John and I went to San Diego, and Bud, and spoke and talked about John's move. And with that was John's first airplane ride, John's first time with speaking before a large audience, lots of firsts, and he was just ecstatic. So then we started speaking we spoke to not just United Cerebral Palsy, we spoke to some other organizations, and he really liked that and decided he wanted to get into advocacy. In the in-between, he started working at the county mental health and developmental disabilities office and started doing work there as well.
Again, that planning from when we first generated continued in his apartment for a period of years, and he really liked the place. When he had his own place, he wasn't paying a whole bunch of money for rent. It was working pretty well. It was downtown where he wanted to be, but then he started to work, pretty regular hours, part-time for Multnomah County, and his income went up, and he was paying quite a bit of money for rent because what his contribution would be changed. And so when a Home of Your Own initiative, which probably started in this state about 8 years ago, came about, John decided that owning his own place would be a great idea. And I think mostly just John's pioneering spirit, just like moving out of a group situation. We know, he lived in a large institution like Fairview. He lived in a nursing home. He lived in a 12-person group home. He got his own place, and he understood the issue of having control, owning your own home, your own place, more choice. So he was kind of the first one on board also with the Home of Your Own project.
upstairs to the second floor? You lived on the second floor? That's where your room was? When you were a baby? And a very young boy? Okay, so this is one of your spots right here? Is that what you're saying? You get sunburned sometimes? So this is where the garden was, right over here. All this area here? Was this concrete here then? No. Okay, so this was all garden over here. Okay. Well, these were the shower rooms, you said? No. Bathrooms? Bedrooms? Okay. So these were bedrooms in here. Okay. And were they just like open dormitory style? It looks like there's some partitions in there where people. No? Those are new? They weren't there when you were here? Okay, it was just one big room? With lots of beds in it? Okay. You glad to see it closed down? Just start a whole new chapter. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. You know, you can see it in his eyes a little bit. He's one of those people that has a twinkle in his eye. I guess, to put it as simply as I can, I would describe him as one of the good people of the world. And I mean that, with all my heart. He is really one of the good people.